What is up, YouTube? It is Doc here, Docky Style Gaming, and I am back at it again with another GodFall video for you all today. And in this video, I am bringing you another build for the supportive tank himself, Aegishorn. Now, if you haven't noticed, when it comes to my builds, there's a few things I do differently than probably most other people as well. Now, for one, I tend to not put in any of the DLC exclusive items because I want these builds to be accessible to all players, regardless if you have the expansion or if you just have the Challenger Edition. So I know some people ask about the Myth or Star, Koalaba's Legacy. Well, the reasons I don't put those in is because most people might not have them. Now, does that mean I don't run them on my build when I'm not posting this video? Nah, because that's not the case. But for the build's sake, for the video, and for players who might not have those expansions, I don't drop those two items in this. And then secondly, when it comes to my builds, I tend to try not to follow the same strats that most other people do. I know it's definitely easy to build for just high DPS, or everybody's always doing Ailment consume builds or max overhealth builds, and that's all good and well, and definitely gets the job done, but it's kind of basic to me. Like, honestly, I could have posted my very first Aegishorn build, which was just a pure tank, but to me that didn't feel too original. Then I was working on a complete support build that was actually pretty good, but didn't really fit my playstyle. Then I started looking at some of the other builds that I posted on the channel, like my Immortal Hinterclaw build, or my Spam Silvermane build, or even my 3 Valorplate and 1 Bulwark build, or the beast of a crowd control Mesa build, which actually I do have an update to that coming soon. And I was just like, if I'm going to do Aegishorn, I want to do something completely different as well. So this build for Aegishorn is my full spectrum build. This allows you to use almost every element in the game all in one build. And if you get that reference, let me know in the comment section below. So without wasting any more time, let's just hop straight into this build and show off how crazy this can be. So like always, let's take a brief look at the attributes. Now, like I say in every single one of these videos, don't let the base attributes fool you, because you will be dealing more damage and having higher stats from some of the other items on your gear. But taking a quick look at the attributes, our might is at 2500, our spirit is at 2600, and our vitality is at 2675. Primary DPS is over 2000, secondary DPS is pushing 2000, and our max health is over 4000. Crit chance is at 64.5, and our crit hit damage is at 239%. And for those who want to see a brief look at all the detailed stats, here they are, and you can pause it and check it out now. But now that we got that out of the way, let's hop into the gear that I'm rocking, and like always, some of the substitutes you can use as well to help benefit this build even more. So for starters, for the primary weapon, I am using the Eclipse Legendary Longsword. This can be dropped from anywhere in the game, so if you haven't got it, run just about every game mode, because you'll be able to. But whenever you defeat an enemy with a southern technique, the enemy explodes, dealing fire damage to nearby enemies. Now this can drop as a primal, and if you want it as a primal, get it from the Ascended Towers of Trials. Secondary stats are some Soul Shatter and a bunch of crit. Key to this build, in my opinion, is crit and Ailment power. So when it comes to secondary stats, that's what you're going to be wanting to go after. Some high crit and high Ailment power and Ailment duration. Now, a great substitute for this weapon is the Sword of Dominance, of course. If you could get it with a Greater Blessing and the Eclipse perk, or the Draskell's Legacy and the Eclipse perk, that would be another really good one to have. I actually did get very lucky and got one with both of those stats. Just my secondaries weren't too great. Moving on to the secondary, we have the Sunflare Destiny, which is a Ascended Towers of Trials weapon. It's the dual primary polearm. Now, the stats I have for my primary is Summon a Void Sentinel whenever you use the Northern technique, and restores health whenever you Soul Shatter an enemy. Now, this is going to be key to just spamming some of your Void Sentinels. The way I play this build personally is swap to my Sunflare Destiny, pop both of my weapon techniques very fast just so Void Sentinels are on the ground, then swap right back to my Eclipse and deal fire damage while there's also Void damage on the ground, dealing and proccing off of multiple enemies. So that's already 2 elements that are being stacked on enemies in the battlefield. And we'll explain how you'll get even more element procs on all of these enemies as well. Now, a substitution for this, if you don't have the Sunflare Destiny with these rolls, is the Void Sight Polearm. It gives you the proc that lets you summon Void Sentinels whenever you use your Northern technique, and that's primarily what is key to this build as well, allowing you to have another element type proccing off of enemies. So if you can't find this exact Sunflare Destiny, Void Sight is still a very, very, very good substitution. Next, we have Mark of the Duelist, which is just for some additional health whenever you crit, so I won't go too much into that. And then we have the Awakened Legendary Charm, the Fatebound Spearhead. Now, this drops from the Lightbringer game mode, so if you don't have it, that is where you're going to want to farm it from. But whenever you have more than 2,000 health, you shoot out projectiles every 3 seconds, dealing water damage, meaning you are now proccing a third ailment on enemies. Now, my secondary stats on here are crit and ailment power, because again, that's really what you want to primarily spec into with this build, is crit chance and ailment power. The crit chance is primarily for helping you sustain your overhealth with some of the augments that I'll get into a bit later, but also all that ailment power, because you'll be proccing multiple ailments, is very beneficial. Another item we have on here, which is no surprise, is Eye of the Dragon. Whenever you defeat an ailment inflicted enemy, you gain overhealth. And considering you're going to be proccing multiple ailments, this is a very good ring to have, meaning you'll be able to survive and gain a lot more overhealth as well. Now, moving on to the ring in the other slot, we have the Dawn Lord Signet. Whenever you defeat an enemy with a takedown, the enemy explodes, inflicting bleed and dealing physical damage to nearby enemies. Now, what's dope about this is if you have your level 5 takedown, you're going to be proccing and spreading bleed procs all over, giving you a 4th ailment stack on an enemy, but this also applies to bosses. So whenever you get a boss and can R3 them or take them down, when they die, they will explode, dealing bleed and physical damage to all enemies as well. So not only is this beneficial to use on just mobs with your spectral takedown, it's also beneficial to use if you're defeating a boss as well. Now, these last two items are self-explanatory, so I'm not even going to get too much into them, but it's Archon's Tear for that additional crit, and it's the Mace's Banderol for that additional crit. Now, moving on to augments, this is what we have. I'm going to go over all of them first, and then I'll go over some of the substitutions you can use if you want. So first we have Paradise, which is just for some increased weapon tech charge speed whenever you are performing a crit hit. And because you're going to want to spam your Northern Technique a lot with your Void Sight or your Sunflare Destiny, and because you want to proc as much fire damage with your Eclipse, you'll want your weapon techniques charged pretty fast. That's why I say crit is kind of key to this build, along with ailment power as well. Next we have Focus, which gives you overhealth whenever you perform a crit hit. Again, you want your overhealth high, so as long as it's staying at max, or honestly just over 2,000, you'll consistently be dealing water damage to enemies. Then we have Twilight Bloom, which is weapon tech damage if at least 2 of your augments are red. And again, if you're going to be popping your weapon techniques, it doesn't hurt to have some increased weapon technique damage. Next, we have Carnage, which is just for some increased crit damage. Then we have Frostfire, which again is for some increased crit damage. Next, we have Rift, which in my opinion, I feel like is very essential, which gives you increased damage for each ailment on an enemy. And again, because you're going to be applying 3 to 4 to even 5 ailments at a time, this is very beneficial. Now, this augment is how you get your 5th ailment on an enemy, and that is Screaming Winds. Whenever an attack reduces your overhealth, it deals air damage to the attacker equal to 100% of the overhealth loss. So anytime your overhealth gets reduced via an enemy attack, you're also going to be dealing air and shock damage to enemies nearby. Now, honestly, you might not even really need this augment, but it is just a nice cherry on the top in my opinion. Now, the next augment we have is the Lion's Pride, which gives you, again, more overhealth whenever you defeat an enemy. And then lastly, we have Healing Wave, just to heal you and your teammates whenever you place a banner. So that's all the augments that I'm currently using on my build, but one augment that I would recommend changing out if you want to, you don't actually need to, but if you want a bit more damage and DPS, you can put on Force Barrier. And this is because whenever you're above 50% overhealth, your attacks cannot be interrupted. And because this build is all about sustaining a lot of overhealth, you'll pretty much always be over 50% overhealth, meaning none of your damage will be interrupted, thus letting you deal more damage than you normally would be able to. Now, before we fully wrap it up, let's take a look at the skill grid, because I know that's what a lot of people always like to see as well, and what I'm pretty much rocking on it. And then for those wanting to see the ascension levels and the abilities on here, I sound like a broken record every time, but until you get to 375, most of these don't really matter until you can start speccing into all of these big boy perks. The Ascension powers that I have currently unlocked are these as well. So that's the entire Spectrum build in a nutshell, allowing you to deal almost every element in the game. And honestly, this build is really just for the sake of fun, rather than just trying to be the strongest build in the game or the most tankiest build in the game, because that's definitely not what this is. But it is a very fun build and very interesting, trying to proc all of the elements at once, or trying to see how many element stacks and procs you can get on enemies all at the same time. But hopefully this build helps a couple of you and a couple of you Aegishorn players who have been waiting on a unique build. Hopefully this is one that you'll try out, and let me know how you like it in the comments section as well. And like I always say, if you decide to change anything in the build, let me know in the comments as well. If you manage to find a way to put poison on here, let me know also, because it would be very interesting to make a Valorplate that has every element in the game. But other than that, I am going to wrap it up. So thank you all for watching. Like always, I will catch you all in the next one. Be sure to drop in the Discord if you haven't. Link to that is in the video description. We go over builds, guides, LFGs, we're answering questions, and just so much more. And for those of you who haven't, I do stream on Twitch now, so every Tuesdays and Fridays are my dedicated stream days. I may stream on some other days, but for sure Tuesdays and Fridays are the days I stream. So if you haven't followed me on Twitch, I highly recommend you do. But other than that, I am out of here, guys. So again, thank you all for watching. I will catch you all on the next one. Thanks for the love. Thanks for the subs. Peace.